Blog Talk Radio. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are those of the host and guests. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Blog Talk Radio, Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Thank you for joining the show today, and here is your host, Richard G. Medlock.
Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen. We're back in the Medlock Post studio, back in the saddle. We gave the horses a rest for 2 weeks. So we're back, and Happy New Year. And, you know, a lot of times, in the 2 weeks, Christmas and New Year's, leading up to those, news basically just fades away. Not much happens, but not this year. It was just constant. Every day, something almost major was happening. And over the next few episodes, we're going to be talking about some of those things that happened and how it's going to affect you, your family, and your life, and this country. When we left out 2 weeks ago, our last episode before Christmas, I read the last verse or the last stanza of Ring Out Wild Bells by Alfred Lord Tennyson. He lived from 1809 to 1892. And this is a very popular hymn that people sing at the end of the year, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And I know people that actually, they don't like it. They think it's boring. It's sad. Well, let me tell you why he wrote this. And then I'm going to read all the verses that he wrote to put it all into context. I love this poem. I love the song. Some people call it a hymn. But in 1850, he published a long elegy, In Memoriam A.H.H. Now, this was an elegy comprising of a whopping 133 cantos, and it was for Tennyson's friend Arthur Henry Hallam, thereby the A.H.H., who died suddenly in 1833. Ring Out Wild Bells shows Tennyson regaining his faith and overcoming his grief when hearing the bells ringing in Christmas Day. Now, isn't it interesting? The same thing happened to Longfellow. He was in grief, but on Christmas morning, he heard the bells ringing and then gave us a beautiful poem, which turned into music. Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring, happy bells, across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind, For those that hear we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Great wisdom in these words, ladies and gentlemen. We should take these to heart. Great wisdom here. Turn the darkness into light. Put those dark thoughts, those evil thoughts, and here he says the sin. Put it away. Reach out to the light. Bring it forth. Let it shine. We've had, last year is done. Let's move forward with brighter things. This is what he's telling us. This is how we should enter every new year. Matter of fact, we should enter it every morning. We should have this type of attitude every morning in our lives to become a brighter, more wiser person, to serve others, to help others, to lift them up. What is wrong with that message, ladies and gentlemen? It's a message that we all should take heed and move forward in those manners. You know, bring out the feud of rich and poor. Isn't that what's driving a lot of things in the world today? We got the rich up here and the poor down here, but we want them to hate each other. Get over that. Get over it. So you don't have everything that the Rockefellers have. Hey, it's no big deal. Use what you have in your life, in your family, and turn it into happiness. That's what Tennyson is telling us here. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. The valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. These are words of great wisdom. And you know what? They come from Christianity, don't they? And other religions. Move forward. Yeah. Don't live in your past. Learn from it. And truth, ladies and gentlemen, truth, when you're trying to live like that, will come to you. You will recognize truth, and you will recognize false. And you will be able to distinguish between the two and decide, no, I think I'll go with the truth. I don't like the false anymore. These are great decisions that we need to be making. Rainer Maria Rilke wrote this: And now we welcome the new year, full of things that have never been. That is so true. New things are going to happen this year. Are we going to have challenges? Yeah. But we keep taking that step and move forward, don't we? We just keep taking that next step. We fall down, we get up. You never fail until you stop getting up. T.S. Eliot wrote, "For last year's words belong to last year's language, and next year's words await another voice. And to make an end is to make a beginning." T.S. Eliot. Look ahead to a kinder, healthier, better year for us all. That's what we need to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I got all kind of stuff today. In Margraten, Netherlands, there is a 65-acre cemetery with the graves of 8,301 American soldiers who died liberating Netherlands from the Germans. The land was gifted to the United States after the war. Each of the American graves is adopted by a local family in the Netherlands as their own. And there is a queue to adopt a grave if a vacancy arrives. Currently, there are 300 names waiting on the waiting list to adopt a grave. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that is gratefulness to this day. 80 years ago, almost 80 years ago. And the Netherlands still honor the American soldiers who died to free them from Nazis. And we struggle in the United States to do the same thing. All right. Charles Dickens wrote, you know what I'm going to read, don't you? Yeah, from A Tale of Two Cities. His opening paragraph, which basically was, ladies and gentlemen, it was one sentence. This is one sentence. There's no period in this. Be mindful of that as I read this to you. I used to be able to quote it in my younger days. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of credulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. In short, the period was so far like the present period that some of its noisiest authorities insisted on its being received for good or for evil in the superlative degree of comparison only. Now, A Tale of Two Cities is about the French Revolution and the battle between the rich and the poor. Yes, Tennyson addressed that. He might have been thinking of this when he wrote this, when he wrote his poem. Does this describe today, in the world today? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. age of wisdom, age of foolishness, season of light, season of darkness. I just talked about this earlier. History, ladies and gentlemen, teaches us so much. It's not there for us to either like it or dislike it. It's for us to learn from it. Can we learn from slavery and doing away with it? Yes, we can. Can we learn why wars were started and do away with it instead of keep doing the same thing over and over? We should be learning. But history has proven to us as human beings that we don't learn from history and we keep repeating the same thing over and over. And I'm going to talk about that in the next episode. And I'm going to give you proof that we're not the only generation or time that has gone through these things. History, folks. That's why the Medlock Post radio show is here, is to educate, enlighten, and empower. And every now and then, we will entertain you. Let me throw this out. It does not endanger the Constitution to use the Constitution. This was a quote put out by PragerU the other day. It smacked me in the face. Because we have so many people out there saying, oh, no, we can't do that. You know, well, what they're talking about here, they're screaming about Article 5, Convention of States. And the critics of it still call it Constitution Convention. It is not a constitutional convention. It is Convention of States. It is not there to rewrite the Constitution, which they say is you're going to do away with the Constitution and get a new one. That is not the purpose. The purpose is to correct the government from doing more harm because they have ignored the Constitution. So it does not endanger the Constitution to use the Constitution. Matter of fact, it would strengthen it. More things to think about as we begin this new year. January 3rd. Yes, January 3rd. This is episode 97. And, of course, the title of it is Ring Out Wild Bells. I'm just excited to be back in the studio, folks. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't do anything for the last 2 weeks for the show. I got so much stuff lined up to try to catch up on and then stay on top of things. Voltaire said, so long as the people do not care to exercise their freedom, those who wish to tyrannize will do so. Truth from Voltaire. Another person to study. He gave us so much to think about, so much wisdom. So we do have people in this country that have decided not to exercise their freedom. We've talked about that, and we'll talk about it some more, not today. All right, some quick things. Well, I don't know if they're quick or not. All this big hullabaloo about releasing Trump's tax returns. Adam Schiff told us that we were going to learn how big of a crook he really is and how bad he is. Of course, Adam Schiff couldn't tell the truth if it smacked him upside the head. So they release Trump tax returns What? Right before Christmas. Well, folks, where's the news? The news has basically ignored it. Why? That's right. There was nothing there. The one thing that it really showed was that as president, he lost a lot of money. And that's the biggest thing that came out of it. That he sacrificed wealth to save America. Now show me another politician that does that. They do just the opposite. They want to get rich, destroying America. All right, today in the House of Representatives is going to be a vote to either make Kevin McCarthy the Speaker of the House or not to make him Speaker of the House. There's a big debate on both sides. I mean, I've heard some people that I respect out there support him just 100%. Now, I think most of you know my position on him. I don't like him. I never have liked him. He talks a big game. In the light, he looks good. Behind closed doors, he does the opposite of what he says. Can he change his ways? He hasn't convinced anybody yet. And then we'll go over that tomorrow. I just don't have time today to add all these things. I could if I wanted to do a 2-hour program. All right, so that's up. The last I saw this morning, there were either 10 or 12. It used to be just 5 GOP that were not going to vote for him. Now, this morning, the number was 10 to 12, and the other report was 18. We're going to not vote for McCarthy to be Speaker. And then the word out this morning is, in the second round of voting, a good candidate to replace him will come forth. We have the GOP Republicans right now in chaos. This should have been settled a long time ago, folks. But it's still going on. Is it going to be a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Well, I do know, but I'm going to let you decide. Mitch McConnell, Democrat from Kentucky. Richard? No. He's a Republican from Kentucky. Well, ladies and gentlemen, our call-in number is 563-999-3676. Please call and describe to me one thing that he has done that represents the conservative movement of the Republican Party. 563-999-3676. All right, please call. Tell me one thing that he has done to support conservatism. He certainly didn't with the spending bill that they passed right before Christmas. He and 17 other GOP Marxists. That bill, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most unconstitutional spending bills we have ever seen. And yes, we'll get into details on that. I'll give you some stuff tomorrow and the next episode. We're going to enlighten you, folks. Educate and enlighten as to what's going on. But over the weekend, what did Mitch McConnell do? He hosted Joe Biden in Kentucky promoting the infrastructure budget act that is nothing but inflationary. All right. I'm also going to have discussion about sports, but not today. It will be in either, it's coming, folks. Now, last night, I got up this morning, and last night in the Bills-Bengals game, this Damar Hamlin, who went to tackle a receiver, the receiver put his shoulder into Damar's chest and instigated a cardiac event with Damar. Apparently his heart stopped. He got up, 2 or 3 seconds, fell down, heart stopped, CPR on the field, taken to the hospital. He is alive, critical condition. This morning he is on an intubator, a respirator, heavy sedation, in critical condition. So we're waiting to see what happens there. Now, they canceled the game. And I know some of you are thinking, what are you? Richard's going to be very insensitive here. No, they canceled the game. First time ever. But I'm going to, our call-in number is 563-999-3676. I'm going to make a comment here. To all you veterans that served in combat, what are your thoughts about what happened last night with that ball game? Just think about this, folks. I want you to think about it, and then I'm going to address it the next day or two. I mean, we're praying for the guy. We want him to live. I hope he can go back and play, that his heart is not damaged to any extent that he can go back and play ball. All right, this is not about him now. Okay, it's totally separate. I mean, you hate to see that. You hate to see a broken leg, a broken arm, any type of injury. Been there, done that, folks. Been carried off a field. All right, not on a stretcher, but with 2 people carrying me and can barely walk. All right, and so I've been there. It's not fun. I've seen a tibia sticking 2 inches into the ground in a game in high school. Yeah, that was not fun to watch. Things happen. All right, our best for Damar Hamlin. I don't know if we can say that about the NFL. Now, you guys can take that any way you want. I'm not trying to be insensitive. I'm trying to be commonsensical. And if you put 2 and 2 together, you know where I'm coming from. 2 and 2 together for you, and it will equal 4, not 5, in the episodes to come. All right. Let's talk about Nancy Green. Now you're shaking your head. Nancy Green? Who is Nancy Green? Well, she is a great woman erased from history by idiots. I don't know how else to say it. A great woman erased from history by idiots. It's okay. All right. There is a fight to commemorate Nancy Green. You probably don't know the name Nancy Green, and because you're shaking your head, but you would recognize her face. The Chicago woman originally portrayed the Aunt Jemima trademark and efforts are being made to preserve her legacy as Quaker Oats removed the Aunt Jemima name and image from their popular pancake product and syrup and other things. Now, now get this. This is what's so crazy about this. The brand name Aunt Jemima, which Quaker Oats officially admitted that it is based on a racial stereotype, was derived from an African American mammy character from a popular minstrel show in the late 19th century. And folks, that is an out and out lie. It is a lie. Green, a former slave born in 1834 in Kentucky, Montgomery County, Kentucky, born as a slave. She moved to Chicago after the Civil War and worked as a caretaker for a prominent white family. Was hired to portray a living version of the character in the 1893 World's Fair. According to her obituaries, she was later hired to play the role for the Pancake Company until her death. Although the name Aunt Jemima is well known, Green's is not. And one Chicago historian worries that removing the Aunt Jemima image could erase Green's legacy and the legacies of many black women who worked as caretakers and cooks for both white families and their own. Black mothers are not irrelevant, says Bronzeville Historical Society President Sherry Williams. I look at Nancy Green as a black mother figure, and black women are the lifelines for generations, both black and white. Through extensive research, Williams learned Green was a philanthropist and ministry leader. Williams is now attempting to place a headstone on Green's unmarked grave, which took her a long time to find it. She doesn't want Nancy Green to fade away in history as a pancake pitcher. Now, it's interesting that when you look at Nancy Green, born as a slave, moved to Chicago as a nurse, as a caretaker for the Walker family. Now, the story is that that Green originally came up with the pancake recipe that would go on to be sold as the Aunt Jemima mix. Green made pancakes for the Walker brothers, who then spread the word on Green's legendary pancakes among their friends. Eventually, word reached executives at the Aunt Jemima Manufacturing Company, which was a company at the time, who ultimately hired Green to make pancakes and portray Aunt Jemima at the 1893 World's Fair. So it wasn't based on a racial stereotype of a mammy syndrome. Now, Aunt Jemima became a household name. I grew up with Aunt Jemima. We didn't think anything. We thought it was great. With media being so totally controlled by white management, these stories about black lives would have only been in publications like the Chicago Defender. Williams, who's doing all this work, said outside of that, there are not many news sources that would have contributed greatly to the narrative of her life and work. She is one of the founding members of the Olivet Baptist Church, the oldest active black Baptist church in Chicago, and at one point, the largest black Baptist church in Chicago. Romy Crawford, who researches African American visual imagery at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, said Green had social and economic mobility not many African American women had at the time, which she leveraged to further the work of her church. That is absolutely the irony, that she is playing a role, a derogatory type and caricature of black women. In actuality, this is a black woman who was moving around the country and, in a way, the world. Her actual mobility in so many ways defied the status of the problematic caricature type. Do you get this, folks? This woman was a hero. Green was a philanthropist who was one of the founding members of the church. Green used her economic power to advocate against poverty and support organizations fighting for equal rights. And the woke cancel society in America buried her because they believed the lies that they were told in the media about this woman, Nancy Green. And this is a great example of woke people having no mind of their own. They don't know how to think. They've been told what to think, and they're happy with that. So thereby, they do not exercise their freedom to question anything. And the tyranny, the tyrants will take advantage of you. Voltaire was right. Let's ask the question here. Aunt Jemima's gone. Uncle Ben's gone. Others on food things have gone. Statues have been torn down. Confederate statues are disappearing. They're even taking them down at West Point. These great men, these great leaders that went to West Point, then came back after the war and became great citizens and helped rebuild the country after the Civil War. But let's take their statues down. What has changed? We're getting rid, or they're getting rid of all these things that offend them. They're just finding new things to offend themselves with. This is the darkness that Tennyson was talking about. It's challenging, folks. It's challenging. Now, growing up in the South, and of course we had segregation, but we didn't disrespect people. We still respected them. They're human beings. I had many black friends growing up during segregation. I had some friends that couldn't stand them, and that's fine. I tried to talk them out of it. Nancy Green, known as Aunt Jemima. Now, I still have the last bottle that we owned at the time of Aunt Jemima, of the syrup. I still got it. One day it's going to be worth a lot of money. Watch. Not in my lifetime, but my kids can reap from it. I should have read this quote after I was talking about football. George Orwell in 1984, the book, 1984. Football, beer, and above all, gambling filled up the horizon of their minds. To keep them in control was not too difficult. A lot to learn from George Orwell. Folks, have you read the book, 1984? We read it when it came out. Well, I had to wait a couple of more years for me to learn to read, or read better. We read it. It scared us. Big Brother looking out over us all the time. We never thought that everything we owned would be spying on us. And you say, what do you mean everything? Folks, your computer, your smartphone, your television, your Alexa, your Google thing, whatever they call it, spy on you. I saw an article yesterday. It said, do not put an Alexa in your bedroom. Well, who would want an Alexa in their bedroom anyway? How many times do you look up something on Amazon or some other place, and next thing you know, you pull up an article on Fox News, and here's all these ads for that type of product, like within 1 or 2 minutes. They're called trackers. They're on your computer, they're on your phones, they're on your TV. I got a report this morning from one of my security softwares. All these trackers, it had stopped. Well, this was the last couple of days. No, this was yesterday. All the trackers, it had stopped in December. Almost 14,000 trackers it had stopped in 1 month. That's what, 300 a day or 500 a day? 30 days? Almost 14,000 trackers. And then a bunch of other stuff, too, that it stopped. So what we're looking at, folks, Big Brother, he's all over Facebook. I mean, when Facebook came out, it didn't take long where people were coming out saying, hey, the government helped Zuckerberg start that so people would put all their personal information, pictures, and everything that they do on Facebook, and the government can follow it. Everybody just laughed. Oh, no. This is just a fun thing. We can communicate and have fun with our family and friends and put our pictures up there. Now we know, don't we? An analysis shows in the House of Representatives, in the 117th Congress, 77% of House Republicans used proxy voting. That means you're not there. So you give your proxy to Nancy Pelosi or to Kevin McCarthy. They weren't there. Well, what are they doing? They're paid $174,000 a year plus everything else. Why aren't you at work? And they only work 3 days a week, folks. So much going on. Ladies and gentlemen, you ever heard the phrase public enemy number one? I'm sure you have. You don't hear that much anymore, do you? No. But let's look at what is considered a public enemy. A criminal whose crimes have so aroused the police or public as to result in an intensive effort to apprehend him or her with the aid of wide publicity? That's one definition. A criminal at the top of the FBI's list of the 10 most wanted criminals. What, do we see a list anymore from the FBI? I haven't seen one. But who do you think is number one on their 10 most wanted list, if they still had one? Who do you think would be number one, public enemy number one on the FBI's list today? I'm okay. You got it? You got it figured out? Yeah, Donald Trump. It's their number one public enemy. That's not hard to figure out. Another definition is a major menace to public safety, health, etc. Person or concept that is despised or disapproved of by a large portion of the population. Well, let's throw something out. COVID vaccines. Isn't that a concept that is despised or disapproved of by a large portion of the population? Yes. That's at the top of a lot of people's list. And matter of fact, a couple of things came out this morning. This Damar Hamlin, they're saying, well, he was vaccinated, so that's what caused it. Folks, he took a trauma hit to the chest. Let's not get into this speculation that it was the vaccine. But on the other hand, and I don't have his name, I didn't write it down, a former NFL player, he's 38, with the Jacksonville Jaguars, offensive lineman, and he wanted unvaccinated people put in prison. Dropped dead yesterday. Just dropped. Anyway, a person or thing that is thought to be the greatest threat to a group or community. A person or thing that is thought to be the greatest threat to a group or community. So let's focus on these last two. A person or concept that is despised or disapproved of by a large portion of the population, or a person or a thing that is thought to be the greatest threat to a group or community. So think about those two definitions and who or what would be public enemy number one in America today, and it might even be in the world today. You thinking? You are, aren't you? I'm going to play a soundbite. Do you think?
We Americans have strayed far from sound principles, morally, constitutionally, and historically. It has been getting us into a quagmire of trouble all over the world, and especially here at home. Americans at the grassroots level have sensed that their way of life is being threatened. During the last several years, there has been a rising tide of resistance to the prevailing political trend. Compromises with communism abroad and flirtations with socialism at home have stirred up opposition in both political parties. If this has led to disunity, then by all means let us return to a program of sound constitutional principles on which we can unite. There would be no virtue in calling for unity to support certain legislation if the majority of Americans were opposed to it. And the fact that both Democrats and Republicans in Congress have at times resisted certain legislation shows that the executive branch of the government may get out of step with the people. I believe the American people know what they want. it would appear that the people want their civil rights safeguarded, but not a destruction of states' rights. The farmers want opportunity for reasonable income security, but not agricultural dictatorship security. Parents want better school for their children, but not a federal subsidy leading to control of the teachings and textbooks as well as the ideologies of the children. People want sound pay-as-you-go spending with a balanced budget, not reckless spending and tax cuts with an unbalanced budget. If there is a need for urban renewal, people want it under local direction, not under the red tape of Washington bureaus armed with confiscatory powers over property. People want the development of power dams, but not the strangulation of privately owned power companies, which have proven far more efficient and economical than utilities run by the government. In other words, there are some legitimate functions and services which the federal government can and should provide. But those who want the federal power to exceed the authority delegated to it by the Constitution will be resisted both by Democrats and Republicans. This is what is happening in some limited areas today. May the trend increase. And anyone who tries to equate this love of constitutional principles as meaning hatred of our national leaders is using Goebbels-style deception. History has already demonstrated that conservative opposition to national leaders was not hate, but an attempt to do them a favor. Let me give you some examples. Was it hate when General Albert C. Wedemeyer pleaded with General Marshall and President Truman to reverse their policy before they lost China? Was it hate when Whittaker Chambers tried to warn President Roosevelt in 1939 that Alger Hiss had been giving the Soviet Union more espionage data than any other member of the Washington spy network? Was it hate when J. Edgar Hoover tried to warn President Truman that Harry Dexter White was a member of the Soviet spy apparatus and was doing great danger to the nation as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury? Was it hate when I went to the Secretary of State under President Eisenhower and pleaded with him not to support the communist Fidel Castro? Was it hate when I urged the President of the United States to go to the aid of the brave freedom fighters in Hungary? Was it hate when the Democratic Senator from Connecticut, Thomas Dodd, pleaded for 2 years with the President not to support the United Nations bloodbath against the free people of Katanga? Is it hate when distinguished military leaders advised that an all-out effort could end the Vietnam struggle almost overnight? This list of acts by well-meaning citizens who want and wanted to prevent their president from making serious mistakes could be extended at length, but they would all illustrate the same point. History will show that many terrible mistakes occurred because the advice of these well-informed and well-meaning citizens was not heeded. Therefore, I repeat, this kind of resistance to a national leader is rooted in love and respect, not hate. Regardless of which political party is in power, you do not want to see your president make a serious blunder. You don't want him to lose China. You don't want him to allow the enemy agents to make fools of us. You don't want him to lose Cuba. You don't want him to suffer the humiliation of a Bay of Pigs disaster or allow a Soviet Gibraltar to be built 90 miles from our shores. Every one of these events, which have been so disastrous and which have destroyed freedom for hundreds of millions of our allies, could have been prevented. And the voices of those who tried to warn Washington of what was coming cannot be attributed to hate. It has been out of a love for our country and respect for our leaders that the voice of warning has been raised. What causes one to wonder is why these warnings were not carefully considered and acted upon. Why is it that men in high places in government, regardless of party, have been deceived? I am convinced that a major part of the cause can be justly laid at the door of the socialist communist conspiracy, which is led by masters of deceit who deceive the very elect.
That is powerful, ladies and gentlemen, and we can take a look at this and substitute Cuba with Mexico. We could substitute Vietnam with Afghanistan. Look at the mistakes we made there. Joe Biden pulled out. He was told not to do that. What we did with Iraq, what we're doing with Iran, they're being told, don't do these things. And it's concern over our well-being, folks. All right, play that again. I'm going to work through that and come up with some good substitutions for today. But he's right. Socialism is darkness. Communism is darkness. Marxism is darkness. For one basic reason. It takes away individual freedom, which is the hallmark of God's plan. That all men are to be free to do as they decide they want to do, whether good or bad, and they will be judged later. God will take care of that. I belong to an email group. I've been included in that since this program has started. And the other day, Mike sent out an email with an article, and some of us made comments. I don't think I commented on this one, but I thought this was a great way. So we're talking about public enemy number one. Let me review that. A person or concept that is despised or disapproved of by a large portion of the population, or a person or a thing that is thought to be the greatest threat to a group or community. Well, this article that Mike sent out, it's called The Bad News 2023 is already shaping up to be a very, very bad year. Now, hold on, folks. I know I've been talking about moving forward, brightness, light, and all that, and I mean that. And I don't agree with everything that Grady Means put into this article, especially the title that much. He's an opinion contributor to The Hill. But it gets you thinking. It gets you thinking, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so who is public enemy number one? As the new year approaches, it is time to consider how 2023 might unfold. Of course, the starting point, the contemporary context, would be the recent history of COVID lockdowns, massive government spending and inflation, and constrictive energy policies driving up energy and food prices, as well as most downstream prices, and wiping out retirement savings, Fed strategies depressing the market, war in Ukraine threatening nuclear confrontation, China's rising political aggression and military aggression, I might add, political corruption of government institutions, and that's putting it mildly, and apparent government-led attacks on the First Amendment, at least according to the Twitter files, rising urban crime, a surge in illegal immigration, bringing drugs, crime, and a disrupted labor market, a constrictive energy policy. Okay, I reprinted this and it came out wrong. All right, a growing culture war on women, fueled both by the Dobbs decision and the rising political activism of the trans community. Now, I don't agree with that at all. And chaos in the American education system, Amen, leading to a sharp decline in student performance. Whew. Now, that'll take your breath away, won't it, folks? All right, that will take your breath away. Just those things that he listed there covers a lot of things. All right. So he goes on, Grady, to begin with, there is no sign that the forces fueling these problems will abate or be reversed. If anything, they may become more intense. And he's saying that because all these radical, unconstitutional bills the Democrats got through the last 2-3 months, it's what he's talking about. Did you realize in the budget bill, the Food and Drug Administration now has full control of the cosmetics industry? Full control, full authority and regulation. They call it the Mascara Act. Why would they want to do that? What has your makeup done to you or anybody else that forces the government to take it over? Continuing back with Grady Means. Rightly or wrongly, the White House and the Democrat-led Senate, as well as most progressive interest groups, read the midterm elections as support for current policy directions. That's right, they do. The White House will not make any centrist tack or will continue full speed ahead on high spending and fossil fuel constraining policies. The suicidal support for the omnibus budget and spending bill by the Republicans in the Senate handicaps the incoming Republican-led House from moving to get the budget, appropriations, and spending under control. We talked about this before we left the air 2 weeks ago. It also assures another round of inflation and insulates the Democrats from political attack since Senate Republicans went along with it and now partly own the coming inflation, rising interest rates, economic contraction or recession predicted by many financial leaders and economists. You see where Grady Means is going with this? It's a great article. And again, it's Grady Means on the Hill. The bad news, 2023 is already shaping up to be a very, very bad year. The White House will continue to push fossil fuel energy restrictions. This green energy consortium that's going on out there worldwide is going to kill more people than save. I've got some stuff on that I'm going to get to in the next few episodes. It'll blow your mind, folks. And now they're coming out with all this, we want people to die off. I'm going to get into that too. It's just, folks, darkness is out there. And we have to bring our light forward to combat it. Economics is economics. The national debt to GDP ratio is higher than it ever has been. Folks, the national debt, I got another thing on that to talk about. The national debt at $31+ trillion and growing is higher than GDP. So the national debt is more than the GDP. Corporation, that would lead to bankruptcy. The Inflation Reduction Act, a sad joke on Americans, the omnibus bill that no one read, and all the other huge spending bills will drive up the debt. Printing more dollars to cover the debt is the definition of inflation. It weakens the dollar as a world reserve currency, a budget, trade, and national security disaster, as well as drives up the price of everything for U.S. consumers. And what is it, in 18 states, on January 1st, the minimum wage went up in most states to $15 an hour. And we have seen in the past the disaster it has been to force employers to pay their employees by government mandate. It's been a disaster so far. This is what the dark side wants. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of this. You can pull it up and read it. It's a great article. He served in the White House as a policy assistant to Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, which means he's a Democrat. But he writes good stuff. He writes stuff to make you think. That's what we try to do here. That's why I pulled this up. This is such a great article to get you to think. Now let's go back. I hope you've been thinking. Who is public enemy number one? A person or concept that is despised or disapproved of by a large person or a thing that is thought to be the greatest threat to a group or community. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, the federal government of the United States fits both of those definitions. So I think it is safe that we can say that in the United States of America and even in the world, public enemy number one is the United States government. Now, in the world, it's the globalist. It's this green energy deal. It's this one world order. Klaus Schwab is out there. We'll get into that also. A lot of things to talk about, folks. A lot of things to discuss. There was also Congressman Tom Massey. Have I got time for this? Yeah, let me do this. I'm going to save this for tomorrow because there's a lot of things to discuss here. I'm going to save that to tomorrow. Congressman Tom Massey. All right, folks. Let's wrap this up today. Thank you for being here, kicking off a new year. Lots to do. Lots to do. Lots to talk about. Lots to educate about. Lot to enlighten about. Lot to empower you with to fight the darkness. As I said, the dreadful darkness. I labeled it last year. Now, let's end on a positive note. We have our public enemy number one. Now, here's 10 tips on how to become a positive person. Number one, I love these. Think before you speak. Number two, always keep an open mind. Number three, discuss rather than argue. Boy, that's a biggie, isn't it? There's some people out there, all they want to do is argue. That's it. Their point, they don't want to listen. Number four, think positive thoughts. When you get up in the morning, think light. Think toward the light. I'm going toward the light today. I'm going to be the light in somebody else's life. Number five, always say kind words. Kindness. will change people's outlook and attitudes. Number 6, be objective about criticism. Maybe some of it's right, and be careful in your criticism of others and other things. 7, respect the feelings of others. And that's what we're trying to do now with this Damar Hamlin situation. I mean, his family's in grief. I think he has a nonprofit charity organization. Millions of dollars has rolled in there since last night on his behalf. That's great. That's a positive. Number 8, don't stress other people's faults. Boy, that's a biggie, folks. Hey, what they say? Take the beam out of your own eye first. The scripture, I have to look that up. Number 9, engage in physical activity every day. Beyond eating, folks. Beyond eating. Number 10, don't read or watch negative news. So basically, turn off the news. That's it. All right, folks. We are at the end of Medlock Post Radio Show. To begin a new year, 2023, we are looking forward to it for the many guests that we're going to have on, for the many, just so many things to educate on. And we look forward to it as we go down this road together. So let's just Happy New Year and best wishes and move forward and go out with full moon rag.